October 27th, 2020, Amy Coney Barrett was rushed in as a nomination for Supreme Court Justice by Donald Trump. She was voted in at 52 to 48, just 11 days before Joe Biden took over the presidency. The Trump administration was over, but it wasn't until almost 2 years later that we'd realize the impact of Trump's last significant act in office. He pulled in the deciding vote on one of the largest removal of human rights in the US history, which is the overturning of Roe versus Wade on June the 24th. In this video, I'm going to go through how they legally managed to do that and what might be next, the legal and the health implications for this. I am a physician working in the UK, and I have been dealing with pregnant women who request abortion as well as present with miscarriage. So I will be speaking from the perspective of family medicine and sexual health during this video. Roe v. Wade started in 1969, where Norma McCorvey became pregnant and required an abortion. She lived in Texas, where the laws were quite stringent and said that a woman would not be eligible for an abortion unless it were necessary to save her life. She then filed a lawsuit against District Attorney Henry Wade, which makes up the Wade part of the Roe v. Wade, under her pseudonym, which is Jane Roe. The state of Texas agreed with her case under the pretenses that under the 9th Amendment, nothing should be banned unless it's expressly done so within the Constitution, and abortion itself is not mentioned there, so it should be allowed. They also mentioned that she has a right to privacy, which means that the government should not meddle in her affairs. And so they agreed that a woman's right to abortion excels a state's right to regulate and ban it. The state of Texas did not issue an injunction, which meant that essentially nothing changed and women could not go and have abortion even after that ruling was made. So it was filed with the Supreme Court, who then created the Roe versus Wade as precedent for all women in the United States to be able to access abortion services. But that was not unlimited, and it was under certain circumstances, and so that's why a trimester schedule was created. So in the first trimester, states could not ban abortion. Women had full access to it. In the second trimester, there were some conditions up until around the 28th week, which was the stage of viability, where the fetus would be able to live on its own without its mother. And in the third trimester, states would be allowed to ban abortion if they so desire to do so. So moving on to around 1992, where the state of Pennsylvania started issuing some extra requirements. These included things around consent, a woman telling her partner if she's going to have an abortion, as well as what defined a medical emergency. Now, a group of 5 abortion clinics, as well as some independent medical practitioners, did not agree with these extra controls and felt they were unconstitutional. And that's where Planned Parenthood versus Casey comes in 1992. This went to the Supreme Court, and many people thought that Roe v. Wade would be overturned at this point, because the political background was that George Bush and Ronald Reagan, who had both been prominent pro-life supporters, had actually appointed 6 of the 9 Supreme Court justices recently into the courts. So overall, there were 8 Republican justices and only 1 Democratic justice. And that was the same justice who actually voted against Roe versus Wade being implemented in 1973, even though he was a Democrat. So it did not look good for Planned Parenthood. But in a huge surprise, there was actually a split decision, and the only majority the courts could make was to support the central holding of Roe versus Wade, which basically said that women still had access to abortions, but it changed the conditions. Essentially, there was some evidence to show that there was fetus viability at 24 weeks, not as late as 28 weeks. And so they shifted the time frame and abolished the trimester time frame. And they also got rid of this right to privacy, and they grounded the law in the 14th Amendment due process clause, which basically says that as long as a practice is part of American tradition and history, then it is constitutional. Now, moving forward to 2021, things start to get really tricky. Texas implements a law which allows all civilians to be able to sue anyone involved in an abortion, even though Roe versus Wade is still there in federal law. And the Supreme Court don't do anything to be able to counteract that local law, even though they had precedent to do so. And so this essentially upended Roe versus Wade for Texans and banned abortion for most people, because they only allowed it for people under the age of 6 weeks, where most women don't even know they're pregnant by that point. I mean, up to 90% of patients who require an abortion would do so after the 6-week cutoff. And so lots of things went wrong in Texas after that. We can speak about that a little bit later. But then there was a second case, and that was talking about Mississippi, who created a law that said that after 15 weeks of pregnancy, there should not be any abortions allowed within Mississippi. So that created Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, which is what we will be speaking about and what the Supreme Court used to overturn Roe versus Wade once they heard the hearing. And they published that decision on June 24th. Their rationale was that abortion was not a part of American tradition and history, and therefore it was unconstitutional. And because the 1992 Planned Parenthood versus Casey relied on Roe versus Wade, then both of them had been overturned. That was a huge decision, and they then said that it would be down to individual states to regulate whether abortion should be legal or illegal for its citizens. Now, there were rumors that this would happen, and so many states have prepared already and created trigger laws which come into effect. That's 13 states will now go ahead and ban abortion, and 9 states never got rid of their original laws which were banning abortion prior to Roe versus Wade. They had just been invalidated by that central guidance not being able to be enforced. But as soon as that protection is gone now, they are now in action. So there are 22 states where abortion is or will soon be banned. That has a huge impact on the American people. Now, some of that impact is legal as well, because when you challenge that due process clause, then you also challenge other pieces of legislation which rely on that exact same clause. And one of the justices, known as Justice Thomas, actually came out and issued a statement saying that the court should go further in future occurrences to remove legislation that relies on the due process clause, such as Griswold versus Connecticut, which allows unmarried couples to be able to access contraception. That could be the next thing that this Supreme Court target. Now, thinking about the health implications of this, I want to try and be as unbiased as I possibly can. Now, you can probably see that I'm a little bit frustrated at this ruling, and that's because abortion has been banned in other places before, and we know that women die when abortion is banned. But I want to try and go through the cons and the pros in this scenario to be as impartial as I possibly can. As a scientist, I think that is important to hear both sides of the argument. Now, in the against abortion side, the embryo is life, and if we abort, then essentially we are killing something that is alive. We are killing a human, and that is equivalent to murder. Now, other people go even further Pope Francis calls this type of action throwaway culture, which devalues life and chooses abortion as a quick solution to a complex societal problem. Now, Martin Luther King's niece, Alveda King, says that it's born from the same toxic root as racism, in that it treats other people as if they are less than us, and that this is a slippery slope, and it can lead to other things such as selecting children based on their traits, like eugenics, getting abortion for disabled children even though they would be healthy, or getting rid of them because of their gender, which are all obviously wrong, and goes even further to say that it's not such a stretch to get rid of living people who we see as inferior after that point, such as people who are mentally unwell or even the elderly. Now, we've had abortion laws legal for more than 5 decades, and no country, even the most extreme of countries, is killing the elderly or the mentally unwell that I know of, especially no Western country. So I don't think this argument really has any basis whatsoever, and frankly, that this slippery slope mentality just does not apply. So the next argument against is the fact that the contraception and sexual health education should eliminate the need for abortion altogether. But that being said, we have had that over the last few years. And in 1991, the CDC says that 29 out of 1,000 women of childbearing age needed abortion. We've done a lot of work on education and contraception in the time between then and 2019, where actually 11 out of 1,000, which is 1% of women of childbearing age, need access to an abortion, which is a significant number still, even with contraceptive services and with education as it is. So there is that need that's still there. So now we go to the 4 areas of the argument. The first thing I'd like to say is that when the embryo enters the mother becomes an incubator. There are 2 lives here to consider. It's not just the embryo in isolation or the mother in isolation. Now, Kantian ethics determines that people are not things, and as such, they cannot be treated as a means to an end or a tool per se because of that. Now, if you remove a woman's ability to have an abortion, then you are essentially forcing that woman to become a vessel for another living thing, and she becomes a reproductive means to an end, which is giving life to another person. And therefore, that is an unethical state by traditional Kantian ethics. Another way of looking at this is that by denying a woman abortion, you are providing a legal right that no other living thing has, and that is to use someone else's body without their consent. And that itself is an unethical state to be in. When you look at the medical outcomes of this, by denying a woman abortion, you actually worsen almost all known health outcomes for that woman and even the people around them. And there are plenty of studies which show that, including the Turnaway trial, which was done around Northern Ireland. And essentially, the women have worse mental and physical health. They are more likely to be in an abusive relationship, to be a single parent at 5 years after birth, and to be financially worse off because they were denied the abortion. Now, that is in addition to a higher rate of death that will inevitably come, and it's predicted that maternal deaths will increase by 20% because a legal abortion is safer than pregnancy. Pregnancy is a significant burden on a woman, and if you look at the graph of what happens to a woman compared to a man on a career journey where pregnancy is involved, you'll see how things drop off after that. Now, my next argument is that you cannot really ban abortion. All you can do is ban legal abortion, and if prohibition taught us anything in the early 1900s, it's that once you ban something, it will go underground. Unsafe abortions actually account for 13% of all maternal deaths worldwide, which is a huge number. And that's going to increase as this abortion ban comes into play. Now, my last point, which is probably my most significant, is that it's almost impossible to differentiate between someone who has taken an abortion pill and hasn't told me about it and someone who is miscarrying. So people who are not even seeking an abortion will have delayed care as a result of this. And there are plenty of examples out there. In 2012 in Northern Ireland, went to medical services seeking a termination of pregnancy, and this was denied on legal grounds on multiple occasions, and unfortunately she died thereafter. But she was just having an incomplete miscarriage, which just wasn't identified. And the sad thing is, time is so critical in these young women because they compensate so well in front of you. They can be bleeding internally with liters of blood and be talking to you without a problem, and they have done to me in the past. And before you know it, they are having a cardiac arrest in front of you. Now, this is so obviously really difficult scenario to be in. So whether you agree or you disagree with abortion in principle, the evidence around there from other places that banned abortion, Ireland has banned abortion, Poland has banned abortion, all show worse health outcomes and even society suffering as a result of the abortion ban. And I know that it's not the will of the American people, as it was not a democratic process that led to this ban. It was just the Supreme Court justices who decided this in isolation. And interestingly, just as a final thought, if you read the slip opinion in the document that they produced, it actually sounds so biased in some occasions. It does not look just at the law itself, as a Supreme Court is supposed to do. It even talks about how it sees that when the initial allowance of abortion came into place, they say that it was trying to control the population of the African Americans because they were disproportionately having abortions. But that is totally not true, as the Black Women's Reproductive Justice Agenda produced a really quite good document, which I will also link below, after the Texas ban, which showed how disproportionately Black women would be affected by the ban because historically it is a population which has been oppressed, has less access to sex education and contraceptives compared to other populations. And so if anything, allowing states to ban abortion will disproportionately affect this group of people and also other lower socioeconomic classes, if anything, widening the gap between the rich and the poor in the US, which is unfortunate. Another consideration that really is quite worrying and should be worrying for you if you haven't had kids yet and you are in the United States is that anyone who has IVF treatment, that may be under risk in the future, because it is not so much of a stretch if you say the embryo is alive and it should be protected, that you then say that, well, you are creating embryos in IVF and there are, let's say, 7 to 15 embryos out there. You're only implanting one of them and the others have to be discarded, which is essentially murdering 9 or 10 lives. And so that is a totally unethical thing to do. Obviously, that is not correct. You are doing so that you can create a life, so that has the opportunity to go ahead and live, rather than to prevent the others from doing so. And, those embryos do not have consciousness. They don't have a nervous system. It's not developed by that point. They have no organs. But stating that life should be protected at that point really produces some serious problems in all reproductive technologies. Now, I'd love to hear your opinion. It's such a controversial topic. I'm sure many people will be calling me a murderer in the comment section. I am mentally prepared for it. But I would love to hear your opinion. If you're on either side, let's get a discussion started in the comment section below. I hope you found this video useful and it explains what is going on in the United States. And I will see you in the next one. Stay healthy and stay happy. If you did enjoy this, then you may enjoy the other algorithm suggestion over here. So check that out. Take care.